Hello, it's John Heaton, and today I thought I'd have a go at ranking the Harry Nilsson albums. I've got practically all of them in my collection. I don't think I've done this before. If I have, it was an awful long time ago, so I thought I'd give it a go. Just before I start, I just want to tell you a few albums which I didn't consider as genuine solo albums for the purposes of this ranking, and that would include this album called Early Years, which I haven't listened to in a long time. I don't think I rated it very highly when I did listen to it. This is an amalgamation of his first two solo albums with tracks from each, which came out in 1971. So that's more or less like a compilation album. This is a covers album of him singing Randy Newman songs, which is a charming little album, which I enjoy quite a bit. Randy Newman's playing piano along with Harry singing. Just didn't include that. Also didn't include this other covers album where he's covering these romantic standards. Nice packaging. Not an album I go back to very often, I'm afraid, I have to admit. Didn't include this Son of Dracula soundtrack to what by all accounts is a pretty disastrous film. I don't think I've ever seen it. It stars Ringo Starr and Harry Nilsson, but even with those two in it, there you go. I think it lasted about 3 days at selected cinemas and then quietly slipped away. I am going to include the Point album in my ranking, but this is a Mermaid Theatre production of The Point from 1977 with Mickey Dolenz and Davy Jones in the starring role. And what's interesting about this is it's got not just songs from The Point, but also a couple of other songs from Harry's career, like Gotta Get Up and Remember. So I thought that was quite interesting. Again, I haven't listened to that album in a long time. Didn't include this album. This is a straightforward greatest hits, which came out in about 78, something like that. So I've got 12 albums to properly rank. And also just wanted to point out before I start the ranking, was listening to parts of this album, For the Love of Harry, where people cover Harry Nilsson albums. This was following his passing. And I was particularly struck by Ringo and Stevie Nicks singing a song called Lay Down Your Arms, which I'd forgotten how good it was. And Stevie Nicks does beautiful harmony, and it's a Harry song, which I don't think it was ever released, but it's about gun control and laying down your arms, and I will open mine, that kind of thing. Charming. If you haven't checked it out, it's on Spotify, and the various other people are on this album, such as Randy Newman, Al Cooper, Jimmy Webb, Jellyfish, a lot of good artists on there. So I've got 12 albums to rank in reverse order. At number 12, I'm going to put this one, Sandman. It was the follow-up to, I'm not sure which order they came out in. It came out the following year from Pussycats, and it was a big disappointment, along with another album which is near the bottom from the same year, 75. This album, I was looking at the track listing, and there's hardly one I would say I'd even want to go back to. It's pretty unmemorable, despite having Klaus Vormann, Jim Keltner, Van Dyke Parks, Leon Russell, Jesse Ed Davis, Danny Cooch supporting. I'm afraid it doesn't do much for me. This is Flash Harry from 1980, the last recorded album from his career. By the way, there's an album on Spotify you should check out called Lost and Found, which I didn't include in the ranking, but that's the kind of recordings he made towards the end of his life, which he never released. That's worth checking out. And there's also some good live material on Spotify, like a Skip Weshner show from 1970 and the Smothers Brothers summer show from 1970 with live renditions of Polly High, Think About Your Troubles, Old Forgotten Soldier, I Guess the Lord Must Be in New York City, thinking about, and One. That's quite interesting. So Flash Harry, nothing much to recommend this album. Ringo's on it. About the best track on the album is Eric Idle's opener, Harry, which is a charming little ode to his friend Harry, and with funny lines like, you can take some Coca-Cola too with Harry, which I think has a double entendre. And quite a nice version of Bright Side of Life, the Monty Python film from the life of Brian, but on the whole a pretty undistinguished affair. And then third bottom is Do It On Monday from 75, same year as Sandman, and quite an amusing opener, this short version of Jesus Christ You're Tall. Kojak Colombo was a single, but really other than that I'm struggling to think of anything worth listening to. I rarely go back to this album. It gets better. The Point from 1971, this is a great soundtrack to the animated movie, and it's got some beautiful songs and narration by Harry. Me and My Arrow is probably the best song on the album. Are You Sleeping is a beautiful ballad at the end. Think About Your Troubles is a lovely song, and I love the way he's talking about sitting at the breakfast table and think about your troubles, pour yourself a cup of tea, think about the bubbles. And then he says how the tears, the teardrops, and drop them in a teacup, take them down to the riverside, throw them over the side to be swept up by a current and taken to the ocean to be eaten by some fishes, and then turns into salt water and then gets recycled and gets back in the teapot. Sort of comes full cycle. It's a nice philosophical song, and Polly High is a very catchy song as well. I think this is a pretty good album. It would have been higher if it had more songs on it. What are we up to now? Number 8 is this 1976. This is a big return to form after the previous two albums, in my opinion. That's the way it is. Got the lyrics and the gatefold, and this has a lovely version of the George Harrison song That Is All from Material World, and Just One Look Baby I'm Yours is thoroughly great. Moonshine Bandits, quite a nice reggae number. A lovely version of 1,000 Miles Away at the end of side 1, and a storming version of the Randy Newman song Sail Away kicking off side 2. It goes a bit downhill after that, but those are the highlights, and when it's good, it's very good, this album. Otherwise it would have been higher if it had been more consistent. Number 7, we've got his debut, Pandemonium Shadow Show. This is the one that so impressed Derek Taylor that he bought a box of these records and handed them out to everyone at Apple, including the Beatles, and John and Paul were particularly impressed, so much so that in 1968, when they were in New York and the press asked them, what's your favourite band? They both said Nielsen. This is a lovely album. It's a little bit disjointed in terms of mixture of, doesn't flow that well. It's got a mixture of Nielsen originals and covers, like River Deep Mountain High is on here. I never cared much for that song anyway. 1941 is one of Harry's early classics. He covers the Beatles' You Can't Do That, and he also covers She's Leaving Home on here. And Sleep Late My Lady Friend is another lovely Harry original. Cuddly Toy, the same. And Without Her, an early classic from Harry. And then just one place above that, I've got his second album, Aerial Ballet. With this is his songwriting is getting better. It's got Bath, which is just wonderful. Good Old Desk, hilarious. Mr. Richland's favourite song is a nice one. Everybody's Talking was the big hit, which was not written by him, but was featured in the film. I've forgotten the name of the film it was in, but anyway, it was a big hit, and it was written by Neil. Forgotten his first name. Someone Neil. It's funny how Harry tends to be remembered, not mostly, but quite a lot for the cover versions he did, such as that one and one which is going to come up later. Anyway, number 5, plenty of great Harry originals, if only they would get more recognition. Number 5, we've got this album from 1972, Son of Schmielsen, the follow-up to Schmielsen, and this is the original gatefold edition. It did come out in the 80s on a single sleeve edition, but I was happy to find the gatefold. It has a poster in it, a nice inner sleeve, and a lot of great names are on this track. Richard Perry produced it, as he'd produced the previous album. Ringo's on here, George Harrison is on here, I mentioned Richard Perry. Del Newman's doing the string arrangements for Remember and The Most Beautiful World in the World, and you've also got people like Peter Frampton turning up. Highlights on this album would include Spaceman, the Lottery song, At My Front Door, those 3 on side 2, and then Remember and Joy, probably my favourites on side one. A lot of humour in this album, and whereas later on the humour didn't quite hit home on here, he was on top form. Coming to number 4, and this is the top 4, we got the 1974 John Lennon produced Pussycats. And this would have been higher if it wasn't a little bit, it's a bit inconsistent. When it's good, it's fantastic, like the Jimmy Cliff cover at the beginning, Many Rivers to Cross, is just sensational, even though his voice is pretty much shot. And a lovely version of the song Save the Last Dance for Me. Those opened side 1 and 2 respectively. Mucho Mungo is a nice song co-written with Lennon. Loop to Loop is great fun. Don't Forget Me is a bit of a heartbreaking ballad. Old Forgotten Soldier was an older song that he didn't get around to recording before, done very effectively. Less effective are the Dylan cover Subterranean Homesick Blues and the cover of Rock Around the Clock, which to me are a bit cacophonous, but as I say, when this is good, it's absolutely fantastic. So that was Pussycats. We're into the top 3. This is his 1977 effort, Nielsen, and it's a dreadful cover, but it's a great album. And the reason I've put this so high, because I go back to it a hell of a lot. It flows really well from start to finish. It's one of those albums you can just be in the mood for, like you're in a soft, you want to hear ballads kind of mood. Put on this album. It's got lovely string arrangements from Mike McNaught. It's engineered and co-produced by Robin Jeffrey Cable. All I Think About Is You is the lead-off track, beautiful. Who Done It is a hilarious song about kind of Cluedo type scenario with people getting murdered in a house. Going Down has some very effective vocal gymnastics from Harry. Blanket for a Sail and Laughing Man are just hilarious, happy-go-lucky songs on side 2, and then a very moving ballad, Perfect Day, closes off the album. So 77, not all of his albums post Pussycats were good by any stretch of the imagination, but this one was, I would almost say, fantastic. I really, really rate that album. Number 2, I could have put this at number 1, but today it's number 2, 1971's Nilsson Schmielsen, easily his best remembered album, the biggest hit. It's got the huge cover version of the Badfinger song Without You, written by Pete Ham and Tom Evans. It's got his own song Coconut, which was also a big hit single. It's got the cover version of Let the Good Times Roll, which is wonderful. The Rocky Jump Into the Fire, which is moving. And then some great piano numbers on side 1, Gotta Get Up, which was a rewrite of a previous song. Early in the Morning, the cover version of that blues song with him just accompanying himself on the organ, that's beautiful. And the Moonbeam song, probably one of his best ballads of all time. And Down is another pounding piano track. I managed to pick up over the years not 1 but 2 posters, 1 small and 1 big. So I'm not quite sure how I managed to do that. Here's the small one. I won't open the big one, it's a bit out of focus. So that's number 2. So can you guess what my number 1 is? I don't have Skidoo from 1968, which I think is mainly instrumental. I was listening to that on Spotify last night. And also some sessions available on Spotify, including a version of John Lennon's Isolation, which I didn't think was very good, and an interesting Italian version of Without You called Per Ci or something, where he's singing it in Italian all the way through up until the last chorus when it goes back into English. So he must have thought, okay, I can't be bothered to reach that high note again, so we're just going to substitute the English for the last minute. So that slightly detracts from one's enjoyment of that Italian version, but it's worth checking out anyway. It's on Spotify. So number 1, 1969, the Harry, self-titled Harry album, and this to me has more of his personality on it than any other Harry Nilsson album. It's opens off with probably one of my top 5 Harry songs of all time, the Puppy song, later covered by Mary Hopkin, and I remember seeing it in some Jack Nicholson movie, I can't remember the name, but it's a great 60s sounding catchy song. I think other people might have had hits with it, I can't quite recall. And then Mother Nature's Son, lovely cover version of the track from the White Album from the previous year. City Life is a gorgeous kind of bluesy number, and then I Guess the Lord Must Be in New York City is on side 2 here. Very simple song but very effective. Lovely cover of Mr. Bojangles' which I've heard other people do a cover of that song. I think Harry does the best from what the ones I've heard. And then a lovely cover of Randy Newman's song, Simon Smith, and the Amazing Dancing Bear. So a few covers on here. Morning Glory Story is an original. I think Maybe is an original as well. So I would say maybe 30% of this album is cover versions, about a third. But there's enough Harry originals for me to put this at number one, and the cover versions he chooses are just gorgeous, really suits his voice, Mother Nature's Son in particular. So this was my top 12, my ranking of the 12 Harry albums, at least the ones in my collection. Hope you agreed with some of it. No problem if you didn't. I'm sure you've got your own favourites, and particularly the ones in the top half of the list I would recommend checking out. In fact, anything from about 9 upwards I would recommend checking out, because they've all got their merits. Maybe you can skip the last 3 on my list if you're being selective. But that was Harry Nilsson, long since gone from us, unfortunately. He died in the mid-90s and is missed by everyone. Great character by all accounts, great musician, great songwriter. So thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.